All right, I can answer that question you had about what is the relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide. First of all, we either eat oxygen in food, um, carbon-based bipedal organism with external integument. That's how we're actually thought of as humans. Of course, bipedal, we walk on 2 feet. External integument, we have skin, but we're carbon-based. And what does that mean? That carbon-based means that all organic molecules have as their backbone carbon. And without getting into explaining how molecules combine, uh, carbon is an unstable molecule and wants to join with other unstable molecules. And oxygen is an unstable. So oxygen joins with carbon, and therefore we can see carbon dioxide later. But each cell of our body and all the structures of our body are built with this carbon backbone, and then hydrogens and oxygens are applied to it. In some cases, like proteins and nucleic acids, we actually add nitrogen to it too. So you can eat oxygen, and it comes in the form of molecules, and it helps to form the organic matter of our body. But that oxygen is locked in. It's heavily bonded to other elements, and it's forming compounds and molecules that aren't likely to come apart easily. So that's not what we really want to talk about. What we want to talk about is the oxygen that you would respirate, you would breathe in. So when you breathe in the oxygen, it only has one purpose, and that is to turn acid into water. So sort of like turning water into wine, but a little different. Now, when acid, where acid? What's the acid coming from? Hydrogen ions are acid. So anytime we have a chemical reaction that releases hydrogen ions, then we have acidity. So the one of the magic things of life is that the only energy source we have is the sun, but we certainly can't eat sunlight. And sunlight hits our skin, and although it can initiate a cascade effect that will create vitamin D eventually in the kidney, it won't give us any energy. So where do we get the energy from? And if the sun's the only source of energy, how does that happen? So the sunlight comes down, it hits a chlorophyll surface like a leaf, and now goes through two cycles, the Kelvin cycles, photosystem 1 and 2. And photosystem 1 takes that sunlight and turns it into a molecule called ATP. Yay, energy, right? And so that energy is then taken to make starch. And in a plant, starch is carbohydrate. And we eat the plant, we get the starch, the carbohydrate, the sugar. Then when we eat the sugar, then we burn it in a cell. We burn it, a chemical fire. So you're on fire. Yeah, you are. Really, you are. Chemical fire, you're burning. So that's, we know this because if you went for a run right now, you'd start to sweat. Chemical fire is really getting hot, right? So you sweat. So you relax, chemical fire goes down, you cool down. Chemical burning. Now, when we burn that sugar, we go through a series of processes, and now we have to produce that molecule ATP that was produced by the plant from the sunlight. That was the first thing the plant was able to do. But we have to eat the sugar, burn the sugar, and then we too can produce that molecule ATP. That molecule is what we need for energy. That's the sun arriving in our body. The sun went through the plant, produced ATP, then produced sugar. We ate the sugar, burnt the sugar, and we get the ATP, the sunlight energy. So it's kind of cool, huh? Now, once we do that, once we produce that we produce hydrogen ions. And when we produce hydrogen ions, we produce, like we talked about a moment ago, or I talked about a moment ago, and that's acid. So if we continue to produce too much acid, then the cellular reality, the cellular life, can't function like it should. And we have to stop doing whatever we're doing. But remember, we talked, well, in one of the other talks, oxygen is an unstable molecule. It wants to join with other molecules. Hydrogen is unstable, wants to join with other molecules. They join together right away. And H2O. We take the hydrogens, the acid, we add it to an oxygen molecule that we breathe in. We breathe it in, it comes down, it joins with the hydrogen, and it turns it into water. Now, at that point, that's what oxygen's job is. It's going from the air through the cells of the lung into the blood system, traveling to the cell that's working hard. So if a cell is working hard, it's producing lots of acid. So the oxygen crosses the barrier, enters in, joins with the acid, produces water. And now you can continue to produce energy. This is aerobic respiration. Now, during this time, during the burning of the sugar on the way to making ATP at the end, we have a couple of processes where we give off oxygen molecules and they join with the carbons and form carbon dioxide. And now the carbon dioxide is released, and the carbon dioxide is released into the blood. So when we contemplate oxygen and carbon dioxide is like when you burn gas in your car and you get exhaust coming out of the exhaust pipe. That's partly carbon dioxide and partly carbon monoxide. We're not burning the fossil fuel, so we don't get the carbon monoxide. But by burning the sugars in a chemical fire, we do get carbon dioxide. And so we take that carbon dioxide out of the system. And so the oxygen itself, it isn't part of carbon dioxide, it became water. The carbon dioxide is a waste product of burning the sugar. And the carbon dioxide goes into the blood. Now, as carbon dioxide enters the blood, 70% of it is used to control acidity in the blood. So the carbon dioxide is taken up into a red blood cell, and in the presence of an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase, it actually changes into a molecule called bicarbonate. And you know bicarbonate, you've probably eaten it to settle your stomach, right? Sodium bicarbonate. So you take bicarbonate, reduces, it's a buffer and can absorb acid. So it's released into the blood system. Now, 70% of all the carbon dioxide that is released as a waste gas from the burning of sugar is taken up in the blood and turned into bicarbonate, which controls acidity in the blood. So when we contemplate this effect, if you have a high acid diet, now remember that fats and proteins are acidic, and all vegetable matter is alkaline. Now, alkaline will contribute to a lower acidity level in the body. High protein, high fat diet will cause higher acidity in the body. So to combat high acidity, we eat large concentrations of alkaline. And we rely on that to help keep the acidity down. But we also rely on bicarbonate being produced by carbon dioxide, which is released from the burning of sugar. Now, the carbon dioxide, 23% of it will actually go out and be breathed out when you breathe each time. And then 7% of it will remain dissolved in the plasma of the blood. So to answer the question about how does oxygen and carbon dioxide relate to one another, the real relationship is that oxygen is used in the aerobic respiration, in aerobic respiration, and carbon dioxide is produced during aerobic respiration. And that's how oxygen and carbon dioxide relate to one another in the human body. So the question relating again to what we just talked about, the carbon dioxide and oxygen, and the next question was, so what happens when you go from a basal state where you're really inactive to a state where you're highly active, and what is happening to oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how does this all affect you and your life? Well, the fact is that we can produce, we pump about 5 liters of blood per minute at rest, and at maximal exercise we pump about 25 liters of blood per minute at rest. So we carry oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. The more oxygen you want to the body, the more blood you have to bring to the cell. The more carbon dioxide you need to remove from the cell, the more blood you need to bring to the cell. So as we increase our metabolic rate, now metabolic rate is all the chemical reactions that are occurring at any given moment in time in the human body. And fun factoid, there are more chemical reactions per second in the human body than there are stars in the universe. We have 40 trillion cells, and each one of those cells has maybe thousands of chemical reactions happening per second. The number is astronomical. So when we contemplate that as you get more active, you have to start burning more sugar. And as you burn more sugar, the body gets hotter. And the harder you work, the hotter your body gets. Now, there can become a point where you can work hard enough, long enough, where you can't continue to go anymore due to dehydration or a loss of fuel. But generally speaking, if you can hydrate yourself and you can maintain your fuel systems and your connective tissues don't start to break down and your inflammation doesn't become so great that you have to stop, then you can go for great lengths of time. And we know this because people who train for ultra marathons can run hundreds of miles. Um, and we know from the past, the Terra Humera, which is a group of people from Mexico that live in the high mountains, are a group of people that run all the time. And they've been known to run up as far as 400 miles in a single run. So the body can, if hydrated and enough fuel and has the ability to withstand the stress, can go for very, very long periods of time. Remembering that as long as we can pump enough blood to the tissue, then we can continue to turn the hydrogen atoms or acid that is being produced in aerobic respiration into water. That's the purpose of oxygen. And then we take up the carbon dioxide, we make enough bicarbonate, then we can break down the acidity that builds up over time while we run. The other kind of interesting thing about this is, and this really relates to training. If you're out there and you're training and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I've been running for say 2 years and doing other aerobic exercises as well, and I've built up this really powerful aerobic base. And how long will that last if I stop? Well, you lose 100% of your training effect within 6 months, but you start to lose your training effect after 72 days. So if you've taken 3 days off, then you'll start to lose training effect, but you'll just start. And then it takes 6 months to lose all of your training effect. Now, the training effect you lose more quickly will be the strength in the muscles, the that sort of thing. And the things that you will lose last are the things that relate to carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide means that you're going to be able to, if you've trained a lot and you've regularly put yourself into a high acid environment, lots of lactic acid, high acid environment, your body has become more efficient at producing bicarbonate and it's become more efficient at controlling for pH. These chemical changes that have occurred in your body over those years of training, those are the changes that will take the longest to leave you. Also, getting a little away from the idea of oxygen and carbon dioxide so much with training. But one of the other things is the way your bones develop. Around your joints, you have small little scaffolds of bone that strengthen the bone inside. It's not totally solid, but it's not hollow like the long parts of your bone. So it makes it stronger. Those are called trabeculae. And they align themselves to whatever stress you're applying to the bone. So if you've been applying stress to a bone, say you've been a cyclist and you decide to go from cycling to running, there'll be different stresses placed on your bones. And it'll take about 6 months for the trabeculae to realign themselves to the new stress loads that you've placed on your body. Conversely, if you stop doing what you're doing and take up something else, it'll take about 6 months for that training effect to leave as well. So when we contemplate the idea of high exercise loads versus low exercise loads, what's the difference in oxygen and carbon dioxide while at rest and while at exercise? Remembering that it all relates to the cell itself is the living organism. It has its own needs. It has its own wants and desires. If you make that cell work hard, then it's going to want to eat more. And when it eats more, it's going to burn the sugar that it eats. And when it burns that sugar, it's going to get hot, right? And it's going to have to dissipate heat, sweat. So when we contemplate this, then the body is more than capable of increasing the oxygen to change the acid into water. And it's more than capable of taking up the excess carbon dioxide because there's 25 liters per minute at high levels of exercise and compared to 1 liter a minute at pardon me, 5 liters a minute at rest. Thank you very much. So the question is that when muscle, well, I guess the question really is when we exercise, is it just about producing more energy? Can we just produce more ATP molecules and therefore we can do more? And if we just have higher blood, so if we have 25 liters a minute instead of 5 liters a minute? Is that going to do it? And the answer, of course, is no. There's more to it than that. It's hard work. What's going to talk about here is I'm going to talk about something called muscle unit recruitment. We have three types of muscle in the human body. We have cardiac muscle that's in the heart. We have smooth muscle that controls the walls of our intestines, the stomach, things like that, and some breathing and certain things. So we have we have those smooth muscles in our body, and those smooth muscles are autonomic. We have no conscious control over them whatsoever. And the autonomic nervous system runs the smooth muscle, and autonomic nervous system runs the cardiac muscle. And a good thing too, because if you had to think about your heart pumping every time it needed to pump, that would be bad. But when we contemplate the muscles we can move, our skeletal muscles, we have an entire system of the nervous system, the somatic system, and its only function is to use skeletal muscles. That's its only job. So when we contemplate that, we say, okay, we've got this nervous system, it's a complete system, and its only job is to run our muscles. And why do we run muscles? Like, what's the point of a muscle? The cells within you have a life. We've talked about this in previous talks. The cell is alive and it has needs. And when the cell gets hungry enough, it will inform you that it's hungry. And if you haven't got food to feed it, then you will have to engage your muscles, go out and find or create food. So that's the purpose of muscles. It's to keep us fed, it's to keep us safe, it's to keep us secure. And so we fire up the muscles to meet the needs of the cells. But what about muscle cells? They're a unique kind of cell. They have two qualities to them. They have a quality that they share with nerve cells, and that's they're excitable, right? That they can create an electrical signal. And then they have the quality that other cells don't have. They can contract and expand. So this contraction is what makes it unique. It gives us the ability to move. The muscle contracts, it pulls on the bone moves. So ultimately, when we contemplate how does this work and what gives me the ability to do more work with this muscle? Well, to some level, no question about it. If I improve my aerobic system, that means I'll have better energy, higher energy system. That means I'll be able to produce more energy for longer, which means I can do more. But there's another thing called motor unit recruitment. Now, motor unit recruitment means that if we were to contemplate a cell in the heart, if you apply a stimulus to one cell in the heart, the whole heart will beat. It's synchronous. So one cell gets the cell beside it to fire, which gets the cell beside it to fire, which gets the cell beside it to fire. So exciting one excites many. But in the skeletal system, each cell has to be individually fired, one at a time. So this cell, that cell, that cell, that cell has to have a connection to the somatic nervous system to fire. Now, this means that if I want to pick up something, I'm capable of curling 35 pounds, but if I want to pick up a 5 pound and I curl 5 pounds, I don't need all the muscle fibers to fire. I only need some of them to fire. So here we have these four fibers and they're all capable of firing. But if I only need one to do the job, then I'll only fire that one. And that one will work because that's all that's needed. I don't need all of these to fire. That's recruiting the muscle. Now, motor unit recruitment means that the more intense the exercise, the more muscle fibers you recruit. So if I want to lift up the maximum that I can lift, then I have to recruit all the fibers. Motor unit recruitment. Now, a motor unit in and of itself is a motor neuron and all of the muscle fibers that it would innervate. So a single motor neuron will come down. And in something like the eye, where movements are very precise, there might only be 3 muscle fibers for every motor unit. So the concept there is that the nervous system has great control over those muscles. And the eyes then can move with incredible accuracy. But the thigh, which is a large, powerful muscle group, and kicking with the thigh, we don't have to be super accurate. So with the thigh, A single motor neuron, a single nerve fiber, might innervate 100 or 500 fibers. Because the muscle action doesn't have to be accurate, the motor neuron can recruit many fibers all at once. So motor unit recruitment is different depending on what your task is for. Fine skills, then we have the nervous system will only innervate small numbers of fibers, which give us greater control. For gross skills like kicking and running, the nervous system can recruit many fibers, so we have great power because real control is not really important. Now, an untrained human being, with an untrained human being, not only do we have atrophy, which means that the muscle cell itself has reduced in size, but we can have no recruitment, meaning that because it hasn't been used for a period of time, the muscle fiber cannot be recruited. So, this is how weight training works. You go into a gym for the first time in, say, a year, and you start to lift weights. For the first 30 days or so, every time you go in the gym, you'll notice an amazing increase in your strength. And the reason is that the last time you went in, you challenged the muscle and you pushed it beyond what it normally does in its day-to-day work. So it goes about recruiting the muscle fibers that have been dormant. So when you started training, you could only get this one muscle fiber to work. But after the first workout, now both these muscle fibers are working. After the next workout, all three of those muscle fibers are working. And after the next workout, all four of those fibers are working. You have recruited them. And that's what exercise does. Now, once you've gone through a period of time, 30 to 60 days in the gym, you'll suddenly notice that you're not getting these real great strength gains anymore. Things seem to level off and your strength gains are very slow. And the reason is that you've reached full motor unit recruitment. So when you tighten up a muscle, if you fire up the muscle and it fires up right away and it feels hard, then you can assume you have full motor unit recruitment. If you tighten up the muscle and it goes flutters a little bit, there's a little bit of fluttering going on, you don't have full motor unit recruitment. That means that you can go to a gym and you can get all your muscles firing again. Now, that's also called muscle tone. You've heard of muscle tone. Muscle tone means that the muscle looks a little bit more, it doesn't look flaccid. It's got a belly to it and it looks kind of alive. And that when we're in a completely relaxed state, in the most relaxed state possible, there's muscles still firing throughout your body. They fire like the muscles in your biceps. They're firing randomly, but only one here and one there, very randomly. And the less motor unit recruitment, the less random firing there is. The more motor unit recruitment, if you have full motor unit recruitment, that means there's enough firing going on to give the muscle a slight look of tenseness, muscle tone. So when you see someone that's really fit and looks really fit, their muscles look kind of rounded and they look ready to go because they have full motor unit recruitment. And due to the random firing occurring within those muscles, it gives them a look of tone and ready to go, muscle tone, full motor unit recruitment. And you can actually see it on somebody if they have full motor. Just ask them to tighten up the muscle. If you see fluttering, they don't have full motor unit recruitment. Now, once you have full motor unit recruitment, then you have to apply a sufficient stress to the muscle to get all the fibers to fire. If I can curl 50 pounds and I curl 20, then I'm only using 40% of my capacity and only 40% of the fibers are going to work. And if I consistently do that over time, then I will reduce my motor unit recruitment. I have to every now and then get to the point where all the muscles need to fire. Now, you don't need to do that. Say if 50 pounds is my maximum. Well, if I can still get all the fibers to fire with 20 pounds, I just have to do 30 reps. And I'll eventually fatigue all the fibers because some of the fibers that start working will work until they get too tired. And then they'll shift it on to the next group. And you'll work those until they're too tired. Then they'll shift it on to the next group. And you'll work those till they're too tired. And eventually you've used all the muscles. That's still building motor unit recruitment. But you're using workload instead of work intensity to achieve the same goal, complete muscle motor unit recruitment. So this idea that how do I work stronger and how is muscle related to fitness and health? If you can do exercises where you are recruiting all your muscles, you're getting higher metabolic rate, you're burning more energy. Not only that, but you're maintaining your motor unit recruitment, which means you have the ability to actually use all your muscle fibers. So in a case of emergency, you had to run or jump or do something, you've got the ability to do it. If you don't have full motor unit recruitment, then you're working with muscles that aren't fully capable. And in an emergency situation, even if you have to use them, they won't be able. They won't be there to be used. So all of us should be trying to strive for full motor unit recruitment all the time. Now, when you're at basal state, sitting around doing nothing, relaxed, then you're still burning more energy because the random muscle firing within each muscle is greater with motor unit recruitment. So not only do you get the ability to do more work, but you burn more energy just lying around. So this idea then, I want to go do more work. How do I create a body that can do more? One thing I have to do is I have to create a strong aerobic respiratory system. I have to be able to effectively burn sugar and produce ATP. So I have to have good oxygen capacity. I have to have really healthy cell or skin cells so that the transfer of gases can occur real easily. I have to have I have to have all of that happening. I have to have a strong heart so I can pump a lot of blood. I have to have healthy arteries and veins so that they can expand and take the load of blood. And then I have to have full motor unit recruitment within my muscles so that my muscles are actually capable of doing all the work that they're able to do. So that's the tie-in between increased aerobic fitness and increased use of oxygen and carbon dioxide and increased motor unit recruitment to develop an overall increase in ability to do work and accomplish things as an athlete. So the next question is with motor unit recruitment, should we, what about people, if we stay in a constant state of tension, is that a good thing to do? And what happens over time? The big problem with a constant state of tension is it starts to develop a need for the anaerobic system. The anaerobic respiratory system starts to work if you keep your muscle in a constant state of tension. So this is a state where isometric contraction, where we're holding our body, we're firing up our muscles, and we're holding. There is no strength lengthening of the muscle, and there is no shortening of the muscle, but there is production of force. Does increase strength levels, but holding it for very long periods of time will create over time within that muscle. The aerobic system will not work anymore for that muscle. The anaerobic system will start to work, and it'll start to produce lots of lactic acid. Now, lactic acid over time will lead the muscle to go stiff, but it will also lead the body into acidity. So you'll start to get effects of a highly acidic body. So this idea, we don't want to hold ourselves in a tension situation. If we think about the neck, for instance, one of the biggest problems that we face as we get older is that we get structural postural problems in the shoulders and structural postural problems in the hips. And we get them because initially that our pecs start to get too short, get too tight. And as the pecs tight, the shoulders come forward. So as the shoulders come forward, you want to lean forward. So start to lift your head. And pretty soon, the farther that goes forward, the more you lift your head, and you end up with your head forward and your shoulders forward. But you see what happens? It starts to put stretches the neck. As the muscles of the neck begin to stretch, they're constantly being flexed. Stretching a muscle is the simplest form of strength training, right? Just do a stretch. Stretching is strength training because once you've put the muscle under tension, it's working. So if we tighten our pecs and our shoulders come forward and our neck muscles go under stress, they're stretched, then they start to fire 24 hours a day. As over a couple of weeks of this kind of activity, our aerobic system no longer functions there. Our anaerobic system functions. We start to develop lactic acid. The fibers stiffen, the muscle shortens, gets weak. The neck, of course, is in an odd place. We get pain going into our head, and all sorts of things start to happen. So the idea of tension and maintaining constant tension on a muscle is a very, very dangerous thing to do. And if you find yourself in your day-to-day life being under tension, find a position to get into that's comfortable, and in later talks, I will explain how you can do deep breathing exercises that will help to relieve a lot of that tension, and means and ways of walking and postural correction activities that you can do that will take away from bodies being in that stiff locked position.